Miriam O'Callaghan. I'm joined here by Karl Deeter from the Irish Mortgage Brokers, and from Waterford by Aoife Walsh, who's with the Respond Housing Association. First of all, Karl Deeter, we've had you in studio many times talking about property. Did you ever think they would go this low?
I suppose initially, when we were being told that there'd be a soft landing, I said, okay, well that might happen, or we might have a 20% correction. But then I think as it began, and a lot of people started to realise there was something very serious kicking off, I didn't actually create a lower end band that I said, okay, that's where I believe it ultimately ends. I think that Ireland has a unique set of characteristics, and really we're going to historically be somewhat of an experiment to see where our crash ends. But I am incredibly optimistic when we are on the way down, because we have to actually do that in order to get the bounce. The National Bureau of Economic Research in the USA has a lot of studies that have shown that the housing cycle and the business cycle are one and the same. And Kevin O'Rourke and Trinity College, along with Augustine Benetrix and Barry Eckengreen, have looked at how housing slumps end. And when you reach the bottom, it's actually a very good thing. That's when we get growth. That's when we can come back.
When you reach the bottom, though, Karl.
But we have to get there for this to happen. So I think it's just part of the process. It's part of the clearing out. And once we reach market clearing prices, we're gonna come the other side of it.
That sounds incredibly detached and cold. I know you don't mean that, but you know, the clearing out. At the moment, there's probably a lot of people watching this who are stuck in houses with negative equity, in total despair. Well,
I'm in negative equity myself. It's only negative equity when you have debt matched with an inability to service it. That's where the real issue begins. And I think that part of the way that we're dealing with that is kind of a denial of it. And that's really what NAMA is to set a floor on prices, and the fact that we won't repossess houses is setting a floor on prices. In many cases, I think the solution is for people to turn around and say, why am I spending more and more of my disposable income to finance an asset that I can't afford? Well, why am I doing that at the expense of providing for my family? It would actually be better to give up that property, go rent out a cheaper one, and get on with your life, minus the hundreds of thousands of debt tying you down. But doing that would force the banks into taking a large loss, and politically, they don't want that.
Aoife, what's your experience? I know before I've spoken to you about people who've been in a lot of trouble. What's your experience at the moment with people you're seeing on a daily basis?
Well, I suppose what we're seeing a lot more of now is a lot of people coming to us who during the good times would have bought houses with mortgages for 300,000–400,000, and they're coming to us now, they're in arrears, but the real problem is the negative equity, because as we know, there is no debt forgiveness in this country, and our bankruptcy laws are such that really the debt will follow them no matter what they do. I think that I'd like to pick up on one point that Karl made earlier in relation to negative equity. I think there is a perception out there that negative equity is only a problem if you can't pay your mortgage or if you need to move, and I think that's somewhat misleading. There's a much wider economic implication of negative equity, in that people in negative equity, they tend to hold back their money. They don't spend it in the economy. They tend to save it and put it away for the rainy day. And as obviously we know, a large amount of our banks lent mortgages, and so they, on their balance sheet, would have a lot of mortgage-backed assets. And with all of those in negative equity, banks also are tending to hold back. They don't want to lend to anyone who might be interested and who might actually be willing to take a risk on property at the moment, because really there are very few people out there willing to enter the market.
Is that your experience?
Well, I think Aoife makes a very salient point, saying that people are saving, but they're doing that with or without negative equity. That's only part of the equation. We have seen in our brokerage, for instance, that we are getting people approved. There's a lot of people who want credit who can't get it, but there's another group who want the credit, are getting approved, and then they're not buying, because they believe that if they wait another 3 months that they'll get it for cheaper. And that's a rational thing to do, but they're confusing price with cost, because as the price is dropping, banks are actually sucking up that value and taking it into their own book by increasing the rates that they charge on mortgages. So a €400,000 mortgage at 2% over 30 years costs the same as a €300,000 mortgage today on a variable rate, because banks have basically taken that into the financial system. And essentially we have a property crisis with the banking one, with a structural deficit. Ireland is in a very unique place, and we have a lot of problems. But until we get the bottom, and we have to hit it, we're not going to get the bounce.
I mean, the flip side, Aoife, I suppose, to all of this is that if you want to buy a house right now, do you have people coming into you asking you that, and do you advise them, if they can get a mortgage, to go for it?
Being honest, Miriam, we have very few people at the moment who are actually interested in buying for a variety of reasons. One, obviously, is their income. They're not sure both what their employer is going to impose on them in relation to salary reductions, but also the upcoming budget. There's a real fear that there's going to be a lot of pain that's going to be inflicted on all of us. And one thing I think that needs to be dealt with in the shorter term is this issue of property tax. A lot of people are holding back at the moment because no one knows if a property tax is going to be introduced or not. And I think the government really needs to deal with that now. They need to not only decide whether to introduce a property tax, but how they're going to do it. Is it going to be a flat rate tax? Are they going to tax on the size of your house or on the value of your house? And I think there were indications during the summer that the much promised national price register, property price register, was about to be established, because bearing in mind this was promised in the renewed programme of government last October, but still another few months have passed and we haven't seen any developments. And I think really for buyers out there who might be interested in taking that step, they need actual real-time, reliable and up-to-date information, because as good as all and as informative as all these reports are this week, they all lag. They're all about a quarter out of date. So we need up-to-date information that really will assist buyers when making the decision.
Finally, Karl, I mean, we've got the Minister, we've got the government, everyone's saying like property prices, the price of land, NAMA, they're all connected. Explain briefly to people why at the end of the day the price of property, the price of land is really so important for the whole well-being of the economy at large.
Well, in order to get transactions to occur, we have to get to a point where people are willing to buy them. And that's a vital ingredient. If you look at what's happening in credit, credit went from 40 billion in the boom, and now we're on target to go to about 6 billion this year. Now, I'm not saying that the boom made sense. I'm not even saying that half of that made sense. But I think 15 billion would make sense, maybe even 12 billion. And we're not even halfway to that on the credit side. So what you don't get is this effect of money starting to shift through an economy. You don't get it being spent where people have the confidence to do it. The high saving rates are an example of that fear that people have. You have, the threat of 4 hair-shirt budgets. Property tax looming. I think that site value taxation would be a very good thing. We should shift the tax base away from income. But even the fact that whether it comes or not, we've got issues. There's no property cadastre to work this off. So, there's all of these things that create uncertainty. And uncertainty really is the problem. Because if we were able to put a tenable and credible plan forward, I think it would make a big difference. But we're just being kept in a limbo and being told, guess what, something's going to happen. You on December 7th.
Okay.